Okay, I'd like to call to order the City of Escondido Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, February 28th. If we could stand for the flag salute, please. And Commissioner Paul will lead us. Roll call.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barber?
Barbet or
Barbe.
That's okay. Present, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Paul?
Yes, present.
Commissioner Barber?
Present. She's also from the she's also a barber, but she's from the poor side of the family and couldn't afford the last vowel.
Okay, I knew I was going to get that
I've been
wrong.
waiting a year to say that.
Commissioner
No
Doan?
comment. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Commissioner Doan? No? Commissioner McCarroll?
Present.
Commissioner Spear?
Present.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Here.
Okay, could we have a motion for the minutes or any comments or concerns about the minutes from the last meeting?
Move approval of the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Spear. Roll call, please.
Okay. Commissioner Barbe?
Abstain, I was not present.
Vice Chair Paul?
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Barber?
Approve.
Commissioner Doan? Commissioner McCarroll?
Approve.
Commissioner Spear?
Approve.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Abstain. I was not here for that meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. Written communications?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Barbe. There's one piece of written communications on the dais. It is a letter from Mitchell M. Tsai, attorney at law, regarding item G2 on tonight's agenda. It was also presented and provided via email to the commissioners earlier today.
Great, thank you. Oral communications? Members of the public, this is an opportunity to mention any concerns or issues. Hearing none, we'll move to public hearings. Mr. Feinstein for
Sure.
agenda number 1.
Yep. So thank you, Chair Barbe. The agenda item number 1 for the public hearing, that is a request for a conditional use permit for a restaurant to basically change to a bar/nightclub. That actually is being continued to a future meeting. The applicants requested a continuance. It will be presented to the commission here on March 14th.
Thank you. All right, then moving on to public hearing number 2. And just to remind folks of how we proceed on this, I'll read out the title, I'll ask for any disclosures, then there'll be a staff presentation, perhaps. And then there'll be questions for clarification by the commissioners to staff. Then we'll open it up for public comment. I'll close the hearing, and then we'll have our commissioners' deliberation and possible motion. So, Mr. Feinstein.
Give me just one moment. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Good evening again, commissioners. My name is Adam Feinstein. I'm your city planner. I'm here to provide information and make a presentation on item G2. It's the update to, or the amendment to our 2021 to 2029 housing element. So what is a housing element? Well, the housing element is one of 7 mandated elements of a general plan and provides an assessment of the city's housing needs and how best to accommodate the needs of existing and future residents. The housing element is different from other elements as it's subject to detailed statutory requirements rather than just guidelines, and must be updated periodically. It must also be reviewed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development for compliance. Hereafter, that'll be known as HCD. The housing element must be updated every 8 years, and each 8 years period is referred to as a cycle or a planning period, and it must be updated and adopted by statutory deadline. Currently, we are in the sixth cycle, which spans from 2021 to 2029. The state maintains an offset schedule for each region, meaning that each region within the state has a different deadline or statutory date by which they must adopt. We here in the Sandag region have a sixth cycle approval due date with 120-day grace period. The date is April 15th, and with 120 days, which would have brought it to August 13th. That's back in 2021. The request before you this evening is to recommend approval of the draft revisions to the proposed the draft revisions proposed to the adopted 2021 to 2029 housing element to the City Council for adoption. It is only those proposed revisions, as noted through the strike-through underline attachment as attachment 3 in your staff report, that are subject to tonight's action. The remainder of the housing element document was already adopted by City Council in August of 21. The amendment request includes an environmental determination that relies upon the previously adopted addendum to the final EIR from the 2012 general plan update. That addendum was prepared and adopted for the sixth cycle housing element back in August of 21 as well. The current iteration of the sixth cycle housing element contains the contents listed in this slide. No changes to this format occurred as a result of the proposed revisions. The draft revisions to the sixth cycle housing element are outlined in your staff report under Table 1. The comment letters referenced within Table 1 can be found under Attachment 1 to the staff report. Staff will provide a high-level overview of the draft revisions made to the sixth cycle housing element and their relation to HCDs and the public's comments. Before we move into the draft revisions, let's cover a little bit of background on the city's sixth cycle housing element. The city began work to update the housing element in 2020 through the Housing and Community Investment Study work effort. This work effort included the update to the housing element, the East Valley Specific Plan, which will rezone a part of the city to accommodate our RENA requirement that is established through this housing element, and a residential sector feasibility study to assess whether housing development with an inclusionary mechanism is financially or economically feasible under current circumstances and current economic climate. On July 27th of 2021, a draft sixth cycle housing element was presented to the Planning Commission, where the Commission voted unanimously to recommend adoption of that document to the City Council. On August 11th of 21, the City Council adopted the sixth cycle housing element document. However, approximately 24 hours prior to adoption of that document, staff received a comment letter from HCD which outlined two outstanding issues as detailed in your staff report, and which will be discussed subsequently to this discussion here. Between December 21 and May 22, city staff worked to address HCD's outstanding comments, which included meeting with public commenters and revising the adopted housing element. In June 2022, the city resubmitted the element to HCD, and in August received a comment letter again from HCD outstanding, or highlighting continued outstanding items. Staff once again made revisions to in response to HCD's comments and resubmitted to HCD in October of 22. On December 8th of 2022, HCD issued a letter stating that the draft revisions to the housing element meet the statutory requirements contained in state law. However, HCD noted that due to recent changes in housing element law, specifically those outlined in Assembly Bill 1398, the city's housing element cannot be found in full compliance until the city's rezoning efforts are completed. Those rezoning efforts are the East Valley Specific Plan aforementioned. The red star here, which should actually read February 28th, not February 18th, that's tonight's date, where we are requesting the Planning Commission recommend approval of the draft housing element amendments to City Council. And a tentatively scheduled City Council date would be on March 22nd, 2023, pending recommendation by this body here. City intends to submit the adopted revisions to HCD prior to April 1st and anticipates that the EVSP, the East Valley Specific Plan, will be adopted sometime late spring. The scope of the draft revisions before you this evening entail cleanup items such as corrections to grammar, typos, and consistency changes based on more substantive revisions, as well as changes made directly in response to HCD's comments. The modifications proposed as a result of HCD's comments entail a revised sites inventory and methodology, new and revised programs, and additional policy, and changes made as a result of public comment. Again, for a full list of public comments and how they've been addressed, refer to attachment 1 in your staff report. HCD's comment letters had two overarching comments pertaining to affirmatively furthering fair housing, for hereafter referred to as AFFH, and the suitability of non-vacant sites and small sites. Each comment consists of multiple sub-comments. For the AFFH comment, additional detail within that comment included incorporating local data and knowledge through community participation, consultation with stakeholders, and people's lived experiences in the city. It also touched on other relevant factors related to AFFH, such as housing mobility, place-based strategies, and displacement risk. In response to comment number 1, staff met with stakeholders who provided written correspondence and comment letters related to the housing element, as detailed in attachment 1. Staff revised programs 2.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, and created 2 new programs 2.9 and 2.10, in response to HCD's AFFH comment. Finally, language was added to Appendix E, which details AFFH requirements for the housing element, as well as language on the public review process for the housing element. HCD's second comment related to the suitable sites inventory, specifically with regard to the suitability of non-vacant sites and small sites. HCD requested clarification and reassessment of the methodology for assessing non-vacant sites identified for residential development. HCD also requested revisions on small site development within the city, such as incentivization that facilitates such development and monitoring. In response to comment number 2, the methods for identifying suitable non-vacant sites were updated and clarified. Slight modifications to the building age variable and clarification on the net new units variable were provided. Additional site eligibility, prioritization, and substantiation was also included based on criteria such as proximity to transit, services, employment, and community facilities. Overall, as a result of the updated methodology, the total RENA site inventory has increased by 800 units as the analysis adjusted the assumed density values for sites outside the proposed EVSP area as part of the revisions. City staff also modified Program 1.5 to address HCD's concerns regarding small sites. Additionally, language was added to Appendix B's example sites to show how the methodology applies to these sites. Part of HCD's overarching comments included deferring to sources of local data and knowledge, such as that from public commenters. As mentioned, staff met with public commenters who provided substantive written comments relating to AFFH concerns. Attachment 1 outlines the comments, the comment letters received, and provides a response to comments for each of those letters. Of the letters received, staff met with several groups to discuss their comments and larger concerns. In response to these comments, in response to comments received, staff revised Table 45 and added language to Table A2 of the document, and added Housing Policy 1.11, revised language on Programs 1.4, 1.8, 2.1, and added new Program 2.9 on inclusionary housing. However, several substantive comments received, including the request for inclusionary housing requirement, creation of a housing commission, use of community land trusts, incorporation of a requirement to use a local workforce, and set minimum training requirements for construction activities to prevent infectious disease spread, and removal of housing locations within both 500 feet of freeways and within very high fire hazard severity zones were not fully incorporated into the revised document. In response to the inclusionary housing requirement, because the city's residential sector feasibility studies was prepared to substantiate the potential of affordable housing and inclusionary housing requirement of either 10% low, 5% very low, or 10% very low, did not yield a fiscally did not yield significant fiscal potential for provision of those units at those cost locations or those cost points. The request for affordable housing through an inclusionary housing requirement was not included in the document, in the revisions. As of tonight's presentation, staff received 2 comments requesting that these unincorporated comments be addressed and incorporated into the document. Next steps for the proposed revisions to the housing element include a tentative City Council date of March 22nd, with final submittal to HCD anticipated by April 1st for HCD's review. The East Valley specific plan is then scheduled for consideration in spring of this year, which would allow for full certification of the housing element. This concludes staff's presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Before we go to questions for clarification, are there any disclosures on behalf of the commissioners related to the housing element? None at this time. Okay. So questions for clarification?
Madam Chair?
Sure.
To achieve our RENA numbers outside of the EVSP, our original calculations were that we found that for land zone 45 dwelling units per acre or less, we had a 50% chance of those reaching maximum density. We've recalculated it in our new proposal to 62.5%, so I was wondering if you could please explain what changed that was able to increase those numbers.
So there was a review of projects that had been built in the city within the past decade or so that looked at the yield that was actually achieved on different projects, and those justified the fact that our yield is closer to that 62.5. It's even above that. I think it's close to 70%, if I'm remembering the data correctly, that we would be yielding on developments that have a 45 per acre or less density. So we're even being a little conservative at that 62.5% yield.
Yeah, thank you. In the original update, under development conditions and fees, we had the language to facilitate residential development in the downtown area. The city charges reduced impact fees in the downtown area. We're removing that language in this revision. I was curious as to why we are removing that language. Is it simply unnecessary, or are we no longer providing the reduced impact fees in the downtown area?
So when the document was originally drafted, we had a program where we had phased in increases in impact fees, but at the time that the first draft was written, they were still lower than they are elsewhere in the city. At this point, they are the same as they are elsewhere in the city.
So it's unnecessary. Okay, very good, thank you.
Correct.
Many projects that we are committing ourselves to in this housing element are expected to be funded by community block grant funds. I was wondering if the city staff could please explain the community block grant fund process.
Sure. I'd like to call on our housing and neighborhood services manager, Holly Nelson, if she could join us, and she can provide a little bit of information for you on that.
Thank you, Adam.
I don't think I've said. I think, good evening. Planning Commission. My name is Holly Nelson, and I'm the Housing and Neighborhood Services Program Manager. With that, we manage all affordable housing, mobile home rent control, our federal funds through the Community Development Block Grant, which Commissioner you just referenced, and other types of funding and homelessness. So, you asked about our Community Development Block Grant. We've been a recipient of these funds since the 90s, and they are awarded to cities with populations over 50,000. So we're considered an entitlement jurisdiction. So every year, HUD runs formulas based off of the census data and makes a determination based on our rate of population, poverty, overcrowding, housing inventory built before a certain time. And based off of that formula, they make a determination. That award is typically $1.5 million annually. Our numbers this year are slightly lower, and that just depends on kind of Congress and appropriations, as well as if there are other communities that are, taking away from the overall expense. But we do have, right now, we are in a public hearing, public comment period. So every year there are, every 5 years we develop what's called a consolidated plan. This is a plan where we do extensive research in the community around the needs, and we put forth recommendations to council to approve. So a lot of these plans, as far as affordable housing, home rehabilitation, other types of energy efficient upgrades, those are things that can be funded through CDBG. And I encourage everyone to participate in providing public comment, because this is, again, we're going back to confirm priorities for this year. We are about to enter our 4th year of a 5-year cycle. So there are goals and objectives that we are trying to meet, but those are the things that are outlined here. We've worked with staff on and identified that they are priorities.
So the city applies for the community block grant funds, and
So we actually receive it automatically each year. We don't have to submit. We have to accept the funds formally and create an annual action plan that determines how we're going to spend the funds. But there's no application that's submitted from city staff.
money come first and then the priority list? Does the priority list have to precede the?
So typically, again, we're working within a 5-year plan. So these priorities have already been identified by the community, but each year we go to reaffirm those priorities through our city council. That could be anything from homeless services to capital improvement projects. It covers the gamut of different things. And so we actually fund over 24 different contracts using our CDBG funds that range anywhere from $7,000 all the way up to $1 million. So it just depends on kind of the project and scope. But we will be going to council on March 22nd, in addition to when this plan will be submitted, and we will be asking council for feedback, as well as we're open to the community right now to see what areas need to be funded.
Very good. And, that completes my question about community block grant. You may be the person who could answer another question that I had on my mind.
Okay.
Okay. The city wanting to encourage or help with affordable housing outside of the East Valley specific plan is going to rely on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Mm-hmm. Is that under your supervision? And if it is, could you explain the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to us?
It is actually something that is being developed through the East Valley specific plan. Mm-hmm. I personally don't have a lot of background knowledge on it myself at this point, but that will be something that will be presented along with the specific plan in a few months.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have one more question for staff. In our revision, we've set specific deadlines on when we hope to complete projects that are going to require city funding. And they're all great projects that I would support, but they include planting 1,000 trees within the next 7 years, completing a $500,000 skateboard park within 2 years. What happens if we've obligated ourselves with the state to meet these projects by a deadline, but we don't find that we have the funding to complete those projects. And it concerns me, since we're a city that operates with a very fragile budget.
So the programs and policies and the like that are part of the housing element, they lay out the goals that we are striving to achieve. We do report on them annually through our housing element annual progress report to HCD. If we don't hit them, there are certain statutory regulations that may come into effect. I don't have all the detail, unfortunately, as I'm sitting in for our subject matter expert tonight. I can't give you too much more than that. Apologize.
Okay. All right, I'll discuss my concerns about that more during deliberations. That's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Barber. Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Weiler.
Sure. First, I appreciate all the effort, Mr. Feinstein, that you and your staff put forth in putting this together. I know that it's not easy, especially dealing with the new state laws that have come forth, as well as the comments that are coming out of HCD. I only had one minor question, and that is I was reviewing that program 2.9, and it talks about affordable housing and inclusionary housing. What's the difference?
So affordable housing is housing that's affordable to people at a certain level of income based on household size and area median income. Inclusionary housing is a form of affordable housing that is something that's required as part of development.
So that would be deed-restricted housing. So we can talk about affordable housing being affordable because the rent is going to hit a certain mark?
No, not necessarily. So, well, let me take a look and let me specifically read the program there and make sure that I'm giving you an accurate answer.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to get a certain clarification so that we're all using terminology correctly, I guess, is really what I'm trying to get at.
And we were looking at 2.9?
Yeah, I think that was where I was reading it, and
Okay.
it seemed to kind of use inclusionary and affordable almost interchangeably.
So affordable housing is typically, some affordable housing is deed restricted, some is what's called naturally occurring affordable housing, NOAA. That's places that may be smaller or in areas that may not have as high of rents. The amenities might not be to the same extent as others that would create the higher rent value or higher rents there. But affordable housing typically is deed restricted, limited to households that make under a certain percentage. For low, it's 80% or less of area median. There's very low and extremely low, I think 50 and 30 if I'm not mistaken. Inclusionary housing is a form of affordable housing. It is what is required of a developer. It is potentially what could be required of a developer as part of their project to provide.
I think that was the clarification I needed between the two. So that answers my question. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thanks. Any others, commissioners? No. Okay, I just have, first I just want to thank Veronica and you for all of the work on this. I know it's very extensive and requires a lot of, particularly the outreach aspects. I did want to point out, I was just curious, given the discussion of the CBDG housing, those quarterly neighborhood meetings that you have, do you use those as a vehicle to establish some level of priorities, or at least input for priorities? Just curious, having attended a few of those.
Yeah, excellent question. Those groups and how we fund that is through our community development block grant funds. So there are neighborhoods located in our low mod communities and representatives, so they serve a larger group. So we often go to them to provide feedback and data and present ideas around needs. Every year at the end of each fiscal year or program year that we have, we provide data to them around how we did meeting our outcomes, and so they provide good feedback on where we should go and different directions.
So that is considered part of your outreach?
Yes, it's part of our program that's funded under CDBG, under our neighborhood groups, and our outreach as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, one question. So I did want to ask a follow-up on that. You said you're in the middle of a program now of receiving feedback. What methods are you receiving that feedback?
So right now, we posted the information in the Escondido Times Advocate. We also have it posted on our website. The plan is, or just, some of our changes that we're making are available at City Hall. And on our website, staff can email me or under Housing Neighborhood Services or other staff members on our team. And we would include that feedback in those emails in our city council presentation, as well as we would submit it to HUD as part of our, updates to our annual action plan.
Much.
Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, I would just, given it was a citizen email, I believe, that I saw this morning or yesterday from Ms. Borchman. I'm just curious if you could address that with respect to the HCIS actually identified one vehicle that could be possible for an inclusionary ordinance, which was for townhomes, I believe. So
Sure. So just for the commission's edification or knowledge, Veronica, Chair Barbet, and I think it was maybe just the two of you, Veronica forwarded it to me, received an email from Patricia Borchman, a member of our community, asking questions about why we did not include an inclusionary housing requirement, at least for the one housing type that made sense, or that basically penciled in our sector feasibility study. We reached out to Ms. Borchman and asked if she would like that email sent along to the remaining commissioners. She did not respond. Therefore, we did not send it on her behalf. But it is something that we do have in our possession, and I'm guessing she'll be in touch with us to get that out to everyone ahead of council meeting. But basically there was one housing type. It was, I think, townhomes at around 20 to 25 units per acre that penciled for an affordable inclusionary requirement at 10% low income. Those would be for sale units, not for rent units. The need for affordable housing really is at the higher densities and you're going to get more bang for your buck when you do it at a density and for a rental instead of a for sale product. And the fact that it was only one rental type or one housing type that this worked for. We studied, I think, 7 or 8 different models or different housing types. There was low density, I think 15 dwelling unit per acre multifamily. There were garden style apartments, podium deck, wrap, anything going from about 15 units per acre all the way up to 100 per acre. And then there were, I think, 3 of them that were for sale models or for sale types, and 4 that were for rent type of housing. And it was one of the 7 that we studied that could potentially pencil with a 10% low income requirement. It just would be really burdensome to figure out how to manage that type of a project, to only apply it to this type. And, someone says, okay, what if I'm going to increase my density to 26 instead of 25, just so I don't have to do that. It becomes really, really a challenge. And the fact that we probably would wind up not getting much out of it, I think it'd be better to look at this as through a new lens when we do an additional or a future sector feasibility study, which is one of the programs to deal with that in the future prior to the next cycle of the housing element.
And the current cycle is 6 years out,
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Okay. Any other questions for clarification? Seeing none, I now open it for public comment. I understand we have one written, is it? Or just only the one speaker?
So there was one written comment, public comment that was provided to you. I don't know if there's any, do you have any public comment speaker slips?
Yes, I have.
Okay, there we go.
That's it then. Okay. Mr. Francisco Peña? Welcome.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, good evening. My name is Francisco Peña, member of the Southwest Mountain State Regional Council of Carpenters. I've been a resident here within the community for over 35 years. I do live, work, and recreate in the vicinity of the project. Believe that I will be impacted by the environmental impacts of the project. The city should incorporate language into the 2021 through 2029 general plan housing element requiring that residential developments be built with contractors that will hire locally, pay prevailing wage, and utilize apprentices from state certified apprenticeship training programs. Workforce requirement reduces construction-related environmental impacts while benefiting the local economy and workforce development. In a recent 2020 report titled Putting California on the High Road, a Job and Climate Action Plan for 2030, the California Workforce Development Board concluded that investments in growing, diversifying, and upskilling California workforce can positively affect return and climate mitigation efforts. The South Coast Air Quality Management District recently found that local hire requirements can reduce in air pollution reduction. Recently, the state of California reiterated its commitment towards encouraging workforce development and housing affordability through the Affordable Housing and High Road Jobs Act of 2022, otherwise known as Assembly Bill number 2011, which requires projects pay workers prevailing wage and hire from state certified apprenticeship programs on projects for certain settings, affordability, and development standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miller, Yusef, welcome.
Good evening, Yusef Miller. I'll be representing the Escondido Community Housing Coalition. And in addition to affordable housing and worker rights with our unions, I want to say that I believe that the online access should be restored. I think it's or at least expanded so that people can participate in these kind of groups and meetings without having to come here to City Council. I know we're open back up and people should come in, but that access should be open because it's an enfranchisement issue. We want people to be able to be heard and to input on something so critical as the housing element, and they can't. I think that is, if it's an issue with just me, that I couldn't get in, it could be. Technically, it could be. But if that's not on your radar, please check it out. There might be something wrong or might be something wrong with me, but I want to put for the record that it is an enfranchisement issue and all of Escondido residents should be able to participate and in live time, listen and be able to put in questions and comments. But in addition to that, the housing crisis is still a crisis. Affordable housing percentage is something that we need to keep in focus, but in general, I support the housing element. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments, speakers? Hearing none, I close the public hearing, open to deliberation by commissioners for the housing element, for the revisions.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'm still concerned with the fragile state of our budget, a budget that only survived the previous year by relying on American rescue funds that are no longer going to exist in the near future, and we're going to have a budget that's going to be basically having to rob Peter to pay Paul to provide basic safe services. So I'm still concerned that having put specific deadlines to meet a variety of projects from street improvements to exercise courts in parks, what the consequences would be if we can't meet those deadlines. So I guess I have an additional question for staff. Does the state require that we include deadlines in our housing amendment to complete these projects, or can we remove the deadlines?
They do require
They do require them. Okay. Well, again, I'd feel more comfortable at least knowing what the consequences might be if we fail to meet these deadlines. I don't know if I feel comfortable voting for the housing element without knowledge of that.
Commissioner Barber, could you just clarify for me, if nobody else, what some examples of what you mean by deadlines? Because a lot of these are policies and programs, then if they're not able to meet them, they state why.
For example, we're to build a $500,000 skateboard park in West Side Park within 2 years. We're supposed to provide exercise courts and parks within the end of this year. We're supposed to plant 1,000 trees, which, I mean, I think these are all noble projects and visions, which I support, but that has to be done within 7 years. And these are the type of deadlines I'm referring to.
And Mr. Front, do you have any response to that?
So, well, we're looking at that right now, but hopefully by the time this discussion is done, we should have a good answer for you guys. What I can say is that when we went through the original, or when we went through the revisions that we'd been making, and we went through that with HCD, we went through, I think, 4 iterations of this that we'd been providing to them for review. They wanted metrics. They wanted to know, for instance, how many individuals would be served per how long, this program would provide this service to this many people on an annual basis, something of that sort. So that's where the deadlines, the information like that comes in. Some projects are probably already funded through CIP dollars that are already earmarked from impact fees. I don't know the skate park. I don't know specifically if that has been identified in our CIP, but it's something that we'd potentially be utilizing.
Could some of what I've been referring to being funded by the community block grant funds?
You could. Yeah, certain things that are within areas and neighborhoods that are considered low moderate income.
Yes, so we do a lot of different capital improvement projects. We've looked at replacing playground equipment, building, a homeless day shelter. That's been something that's been looked at as well. So if it was a priority that was echoed by the community and met one of our goals, we could address that. I don't know if specific to the skate park, if that's what you're referring to, if that is the greatest priority of need, but certainly we could be open to community feedback, and if it was benefiting a low mod clientele or a low mod area, we can look at the boundaries and potentially use CDBG funds to finance that.
Thank you. By the way, thank you for being here. You've been very valuable.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here.
Very helpful. Okay. Any other comments? Questions?
Clarity, I think what we're saying or highlighting is that we're creating obligations that will have deadlines, and we don't have necessarily a dedicated mechanism for specifically outlined for how that will be funded. Is that correct?
We are creating goals that we are seeking to achieve. I wouldn't necessarily call them obligations. It's a kind of a guidebook, so to say, for how to achieve our housing needs.
Commissioner Paul?
So I've been abnormally quiet on this subject because I think we beat this to death. We're 2 years into this, and I think we spent a lot of time and money on it already. But those goals that you mentioned were, how do I say this? There were a lot of programs that were already in the works or were already planned, and we took advantage of those and put them into the program. So like the exercise thing you talk about is already done, right? Because it was already planned for years ago. So those things, staff didn't just make them up and put them in the plan in order to satisfy HCD, whatever. They were already in the works, and they said, we can use that, and we can put it in the plan and to help us. So I hope that helps.
All right. Any other questions deliberations, comments?
Only if I was going to make one more comment, and I have to agree with Chair Barber about, all of these things that come down from the state and requirements, and we got to do all of these various things, and it gets tough to fund some of those things. I would have to think, and I don't think this happens though, but that the state is going to start providing funding for some of these requirements that they are pushing down to the local jurisdictions. In my perfect world, that's the way it would happen, but I don't know if that's actually happening in reality.
Are you looking for an answer on that?
Thank you, because I posed that as a question and I didn't mean to. It was more of a statement.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for the clarification.
All right, I would agree that we have looked at this so many times, but obviously I would personally would like to say for the record that I do hope we get to that study for affordable inclusionary housing sooner rather than later, an updated study. Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve PHG 20-0030 with all of the changes as recommended by staff.
A second.
Roll call?
Chair Barbe,
Approved?
Vice Chair Paul,
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Barber,
I'm Barber. I'm the rich side of the family, remember? We could afford a vowel. Commissioner Paul talked me into voting yes.
Commissioner Doan, not present. Commissioner McCarroll,
Approve.
Commissioner Spear,
Approve.
Commissioner Wheeler.
In the sense that Commissioner Barber corrected the pronunciation, I'll do the same. It's Commissioner Weiler. That's okay. It gets confused all the time. You wouldn't imagine the words or the names I get called. But I do vote yes.
Okay.
Do you want to summarize the vote? Yeah.
We have, the vote is approved, 6-7. Is that right?
6-0.
6-0, excuse me. I'll get it right next time.
It's okay.
So the vote is to approve, 6-0.
6-0. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may, real quick, I know I'm usually over there. I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work of our principal planner, Veronica Morones, on this document and all the effort she put into getting this where it is today. This is her baby. I was just here to deliver it. So, yeah, this is
No, we really
a
appreciate
huge feather in her cap to get this.
The
over.
size of her work, when Alex from planning handed this to me, he apologized to me for the size of it, and I'm assuming that's because of my age. He felt that I was probably going to throw my back out carrying it. But yeah, this was quite a bit of work on her part, and I thank her also.
Yeah, her attention to detail and all of the cleanup aspects is really impressive too. So thank you for that. Okay, moving along, future agenda items. Are there any to suggest? Commissioner Paul?
Yeah, I'd like to have a public discussion on the future of the North County Mall. She's going to say.
So noted.
You need someone to second that for it to be public discussion. I'll
I
second.
believe so, yes.
I'll second that.
Okay. So,
I was walking up here, just want to make sure I heard it right. The future of the North County Mall, is that what I heard?
right, and we'll just factor that in for a future agenda. Any other agenda items?
No, I'm laughing because that's the subject of my column that I just submitted for the paper for this weekend. So you don't need a discussion. Just read my articles.
The public wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, they can read my newspaper.
All right. All right, thank you. Are there any other oral communications? Hearing none? Anything from the planning commissioners to share?
Yeah, I had a question about, there was some work done on the street between Washington and Valley There was some new sidewalks put in, some red curbs and bike lanes. And I just wanted to ask about what was the process for gathering public input into that project?
If you are aware.
We'll have to get some answers for you and get back to you on that.
Okay, so then part 2 is, and so what would be any public recourse if the public didn't like something that was done there?
Have to get back to you on that answer
Thank
as
you.
well.
Okay.
Any other? Hearing no other issues, comments, questions from commissioners, city planners report?
Nothing big to report other than just to make sure that we're all aware we will be having a meeting in 2 weeks. At least the one item on the Sierra Madre will be presented. We will probably also likely be bringing you the discussion on the VMT and traffic impact analysis guidelines. So that will likely be in front of you guys next month.
As well as the Cantina.
Yes. Yeah, that one has been
hearing.
continued to that date certain, so that will be on the 14th.
Great. All right. I believe that's it. I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Have a great evening.